had an article that came through on a news group that I follow, and the article was called Boys Blind Cat with Laser Pen, and this is in England. And I guess 4 boys aged about 12 took turns to shine the laser into the cat's eyes. And then it goes on to explain what they did. But the part that I have highlighted here that I wanted to ask you about, and you apparently answered it already, but I just want to clarify it. It says the poor cat was screaming and must have been in appalling pain. The vet told me the backs of his eyes have been completely burned out. Now, would that cause pain? Or when they say the retina is burnt, it's just burnt from the energy? That type of pain.
I'm sort of at a loss to give you any direct or correct information there because I've never looked into that. But I can tell you that from a personal experience that when I was performing lasers at Expo 86 in Vancouver, I was lining up a 20-watt laser in daylight, and my hand slipped on the mirror and the beam crossed my eye very briefly, and I did suffer a small burn in the peripheral vision area of the eye. And while I didn't feel any pain immediately when it happened, I did have a headache, and I did have blurry vision for several hours thereafter.
Yeah. I was just curious because it was the laser pen that had done this.
I have difficulty believing that because theoretically you'd have to fix the target object very, very rigidly, and you'd have to fix the laser with a tripod or some other mount very rigidly. If you've got a human holding it in their hand, no matter, you can try this yourself if you have a laser pointer. Point it at a wall about 10 feet
away. I know. You cannot hold the dot still. It's really very difficult.
So, yes, simply because just the actual movement of blood in your hands and your muscles and the natural trembles that occur in the muscles will cause that dot to dance around.
Yeah, because there's a lot of times you see the media loves to grab a hold of something, and I just wasn't. I'm totally against any type of thing against animals.
You should mention that. But a few months back, the show American Journal, which is one of those tabloid TV shows, did a piece on the dangers of lasers in airspace. And they arranged to have a 20-watt laser set up outdoors, and they got a helicopter pilot to fly through it and give his impressions and so on. And what was rather interesting was that Patrick Murphy, the ILDA Aerospace Issues Coordinator, was there, as well as Greg Makoff, who is the chair of the safety committee for the International Laser Display Association. And they observed this and participated in it. And what they found very interesting was that, first of all, the pilots actually found the laser beam really amazing. Once, when they knew that they were going to be flying into it and they had been forewarned of what effects they could expect, they didn't have any difficulty with it. They also thought it was a very cool thing that would make a great device for using in a glide path to show people coming in where the runway was. Now, interestingly enough, American Journal focused on the most sensationalistic and negative aspects of the story, and in actual fact, in true tabloid style, the television shot that they showed of glaring, blinding light that was almost impossible to see through, was actually from a xenon searchlight and not a laser. Now, for those people who are interested in pursuing this, if you go to www.pangolin.com, and you go to the American Journal TV page, you can download an MPEG file which has the entire show, and there's also a detailed analysis of it there.
Okay. And you also have a site which is a fantastic site for lasers. Any information that anyone would want is on this site. We want to tell the listeners a little bit about your site. We'll have a link for that also.
Sure.
And they can visit your site.
www.laserfx.com is basically divided into two areas. The front stage or public area is aimed at the general public, and it has information on how laser shows work, information for people doing laser science projects, and general information about the industry and some of the things that are going on, the newsletter, conference, etc. Then we have the backstage area, which is open to the public if people care to go there. And it contains more detailed technical information. There's our newsletter is available there. Back issues of the newsletter are available there. Technical information, technical papers, archives of standards information. A new section has been added recently called pinouts, which lists the pinouts of some of the more popular boards that are used in laser displays. And there's a resources directory there, too, for people looking for products and services in the industry.
Did you put this site together?
Mm-hmm.
My goodness.
There's about 10 meg of material online.
No kidding.
We actually run it off our own server, so that way we can do updates as things happen. And it's a pretty big job. It takes me a few hours every day just to keep up on everything that's going on there.
Yeah. Well, I want to encourage our listeners to click on that link and go visit the page after they listen to the interview.
I did want to mention that the Laser FX 98 conference is not a closed conference. There are only 2 laser industry conferences in the world each year. This is laser light shows specifically. One of them is the International Laser Display, which will be taking place in Amsterdam this fall, but you must be a member to attend. Our conference is open to anyone. So people can come and just enjoy some really great laser shows. Last year in the competition we had laser shows competing from Sweden, Germany, all over the United States and Canada. This year we have not only the special audience scanning workshop, but we also have Tim Walsh, who is an award-winning laserist from Texas, who've created quite a lot of really great shows, who's going to be doing a special creative seminar and showing off some of his work and discussing the creative ideas behind it.
Let's take an imaginary person. They've got a little bit bankrolled in the savings account, and they'd like to get started with laser light shows. How would you recommend they proceed with that?
Well, the technology itself has actually become cheaper in the last few years, and a lot of people start off by being laser hobbyists, and it's no more expensive than any other hobby, say owning a motorcycle or a snowmobile. They buy themselves some equipment and start experimenting with lasers, and that can take the basis of starting with a very simple system that uses wobbling mirrors to make Lissajous-type patterns. There's information about that in the hobby zone in the backstage. There are now a number of freeware and shareware laser graphics programs available for download from the net.
Oh, really?
Yes. And there's the cost of scanning systems has dropped. The devices that we use, the galvanometers that we use for making laser images, has dropped, and the quality has gone up. Cambridge Technology a number of years ago introduced galvos that are now doing 30,000 points per second.
Oh, my
For
goodness.
years, the standard of the industry had been 12,000 point per second galvos. So now that you can take the older style open loop galvos, and using the Accelerator 124 technology, you can drive those at speeds high enough to make proper quality, reasonable quality graphics. In the old days, a basic scanning system would have set you back somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500 to $3,000. Now you can put one together for under $1,000.
No kidding.
And it's quite possible to spend less than $2,000 and come up with a functional laser graphics system based on a 100 milliwatt air-cooled argon laser suitable for doing basic light show type applications and graphics and animations.
Well, that's amazing. I didn't think the costs were that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't think the costs were that low.
No, they've gone right down.
That's incredible.
The other development that has come along in recent years has been the maturing of the white light laser. Many years ago, krypton lasers with all-line optics were used to produce multiple colors, and in the last few years, a lot of research and effort has gone into creating white light lasers, and there are even very compact units out now. For example, Laser Physics makes one that's only about 24 inches long and puts out 300 milliwatts of white light. Coupling this with a PCAOM, which is short for polychromatic acousto-optic modulator, you can now modulate multiple lines simultaneously in an inline device. So in the old days, we used to have to split the laser beam up and send it through different modulators and then recombine it, which was a very inefficient process. It took a lot of parts and work to do. Now we have a simple inline crystal that can just be popped in front of the laser beam, driven with an appropriate modulator, and it's possible to get 16.7 million colors out of a system that has 8-bit resolution. And some laser graphics systems are now even controlling multiple lines, up to 6 lines, and are possible of doing trillions of colors.
Oh, my goodness.
So the quality of the images that you're seeing in laser shows has improved drastically with the introduction of the new scanning systems. The color of the systems has improved with the introduction of photopically balanced white light lasers, and the color control of the image that you're seeing has improved. And you're even starting to see now some rasterized images where people have created images made of lines, because since you can control the color so subtly, you can get almost television-like images out of a laser. Obviously, this isn't, full screen, full motion video. It's still an animated effect. But nonetheless, the advances in the technology have brought great artistic advances to the field. And particularly in audience scanning effects, which we were discussing earlier, the sheets of light and cones and so on that go through the audience now are no longer limited to the typical 7 colors that you used to see, but can have lots of subtle shading and texture in them. And it makes it very beautiful to be bathed in a sea of lasers.
I understand that some of the laser light shows are actually just coming on a truck, leaving the truck outside and feeding the laser light into the facility using fiber optics.
That technology has been around for a long time, and I don't know too many people who are doing that at the moment, but there are a couple of people who have trucks that are outfitted typically with higher power YAG lasers. One of the nice things about the frequency doubled YAG lasers is that they're very power efficient. There's a system available that, given a 220-volt stove plug and a very minimal amount of water, I think it's about 1 gallon per minute at 20 psi, will output 45 watts of green light. So this is almost perfect for advertising, because something like that could be cooled with a recirculator, which is a tank radiator and fan radiator and fan assembly. And the outdoor applications for that are really enormous, because you can mount the thing in a cube fan, put in a small scanning system, and with a very small generator and a small amount of water, you can be essentially a self-contained laser advertising vehicle.
As far as some of the newer patterns and things that we see when we go to laser light shows, what are some of the latest things that are being created?
A lot of work has gone into 3D graphics platforms that allow people to create images by means of database 3D. This is the same kind of 3D you see on television. The image is flat, but the rotating logo is calculated in such a way that it appears to be three-dimensional, and it has perspective and occlusion and so on. And we're seeing a lot of developments in that area, and some very, very creative work from people. Lasers, projected laser images, are a limited medium when you compare them to other mediums, because the amount of information we can display is fairly small. Even given the new scanner technology that we have, the amount of information we can display is in the neighborhood of 15 to 1,800 points of information, compared to the thousands and thousands of pixels you have on a television or a computer screen. But the difference, the advantages and disadvantages, or the difference, is that artistically, lasers produce a much more three-dimensional image because of the very high contrast ratio between the image and the background, and also because of the very vibrant and vivid colors. And there are also certain kinds of artistic effects that you can get with lasers that you just can't get any other way. And these are things like optical effects, lumières, and abstracts, which are the strength of the medium. The early laserium shows were based entirely around that and made little or no use of graphics at all. And now we have a lot of shows where there's a lot of representational stuff, or you go to a sports event and you get to see a lot of beam shooting around and players' names being written on the ice and that sort of thing. To me, I'm, I guess, sort of an old-school laserist, having been in the business now for almost 24 years. I really enjoy a good abstract show where I can just sit back and enjoy the abstract patterns and effects which can be generated in no other way than laser. The other thing about laser beam effects and audience scanning is typically when you do see these kinds of effects in nightclubs, in the U.S. anyway, they're all over your head, and there's no contact between the audience and the laser. In other countries where international standards are followed and audience scanning is used, the laser actually reaches out and touches people. And you'll be amazed when you go to a rave in Canada and you see a ceiling of light being projected over the dancers, how many people reach up and put their hands in it and play with it. It's just sort of a natural impulse almost when people see this, that they want to touch it and play with it.
And what's the deal here in the U.S.?
It's difficult for me to say, because I'm not, really involved, and I don't do shows in the United States because of the burden of paperwork. But there are certainly legitimate safety concerns. It is possible to damage people with damage people's vision with the audience scanning shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the United States has erred on the side of caution and perhaps gone a little overboard on it. In terms of changing it, I think until you in the United States have a president or some other high official who really loves laser shows, nothing's really likely to happen, although the International Laser Display people have been working with your regulators down there. But bureaucracy is one of those things that's very difficult to change, and sort of the attitude becomes, well, we've always done it this way, why should we do it any other way?
Are you still doing laser light shows on your own?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Quite regularly. In fact, I'll be out this Friday doing one in a high school.
Oh, okay, great.
I do a lot of high school dances, raves, and parties. I invented the laser dance party 23 years ago, and that is my favorite type of show to do, the corporate shows. I don't enjoy it quite as much because there you're often constrained in what you can do by what the client's requirements are, the amount of time they have, and how many times they want to see their product logo or the information.
Yeah.
Whereas at a rave or a party, you've got a 6 or 8 hour time span in which you can spend a lot of time playing with a lot of different effects, and I enjoy performing the laser live rather than sitting back and let the computer do the show for me.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the bigger names in laser light shows? Do we have a super group of laser light show people? Top 3 names, laser light show creators.
Well, it doesn't quite work that way because laserists are the invisible stars behind the scene. In other words, if you go to a concert and you hear a great piece of music, you know the name of the guy who played it or wrote it or sang it.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a hockey game or a big sporting event or a 4th of July or a Canada Day show, and you see an amazing laser and fireworks spectacle, you don't know who did that.
Yeah.
The person who spent hundreds of hours designing and choreographing the show, creating the animations for it, synchronizing and choreographing the fireworks with the lasers, is some guy out there on a scaffold way back where the public doesn't see them. It's not like you get to step into the spotlight and bow.
Yeah.
There are exceptions to that. I do a couple of tours each year in which I'm actually a featured performer as part of a variety show.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to take a bow. But most of the time, we're anonymous as laserists, and we have to sort of get our enjoyment from performing and our feedback from hearing the crowds roar and cheer and whistle at a distance. In terms of what companies are the most well-known, obviously the most famous company is the one that started it all, which is Laserium out of California. And then following on that, the 2 companies that are most active in producing a lot of planetarium shows at the moment are Audiovisual Imagineering in Florida and Laser Fantasy, which are located in the Seattle area.
Mm-hmm.
So those are sort of the companies that a lot of people see. But the industry has been changing many years ago because of the cost of the technology and, the support that was needed for it. And when you went on tour, you virtually had to take double everything because something was bound to break. Big laser companies with dozens of employees and hundreds of jobs all the time were the rule. And in fact, a lot of these companies were structured where they had artists and animators who never left the shop and who simply animated and created shows in the shop, and then they had other performing laserists who went out with the equipment and did shows.
I see.
But that has changed quite significantly in the last 10 years, and now we're entering the age of the small and medium-sized company and even the one-person operation. The technology has become more reliable. It's become more flexible as to what you can do, simpler and easier to use, higher quality output, and cost less. So now it's possible for a one-person operation to serve a significant market. But as it says in Chapter 2 of Laser FX, the Light Show Handbook, can you get rich doing laser shows? And the answer is no. Nobody in this business has really got spectacularly rich, and I tend to think that's because laserists are the starving artists of the 90s. Just as artists starved in freezing garrets in France for their art, laserists work very long hours under arduous conditions with a lot of technical difficulties, and most of us do it not because we want to get rich, but because we enjoy the art form and we enjoy working with lasers.
You mentioned your book. Do you want to tell us a little about the book?
I attend a lot of conferences, and I'm one of the people who believes that everything should be open and people should tell each other about how things are done. When the industry first started and I first got into it many years ago, everything was proprietary and a trade secret. Nobody would tell you how it was done.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me months and months and months of research to figure out how to do the simplest thing, which is a linear effect. You take a piece of bumpy glass or plastic, hold it in a laser beam and rotate it slowly, and it makes this lovely walking gas cloud type of effect. Well, nobody wanted to tell me how that was done. So I decided to start telling people about how things were done. So anybody who called me or talked to me, I would give them that information. But it got to be a burden after a while, and I found I was answering the same questions over and over, and I think this was in the days before the World Wide Web and FAQs became a big thing. So I decided to sit down and write a book about it. So I spent 2 years writing a 400 and some odd page book, which is the only detailed technical manual on laser light shows available in the industry.
The Bible.
I've heard it called that.
That's what I've heard it called.
I don't call it that myself. And so far, it's published in small runs and made available through our website and through people who come to the laser conferences or who call us. And I've sold copies to people as far away as Russia, Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, China, Australia, New Zealand, all over North America, South America, Chile. So it's done quite well, considering that it's not being backed by a major publisher, and there's about 300 or 400 copies in circulation now.
Great. Well, I think we probably should call it quits.
Have we filled our time slot here?
We're approaching 26 megs on the audio file, so...
Well, you're going to have to do some cutting and hacking there.
Yeah, I don't usually take too much out of a show, though.
Okay.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor speaking with you. I thank you myself and the HoloTalk listeners for coming on. We're basically holography related, but we touch on the lasers, and laser light shows, a new area probably for a lot of people that listen to this show. But I bet you there's a lot of people out there doing holograms that think, I bet you I could take this laser and do a laser light show with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's true. Well, thanks very much for having me on, and look forward to doing this again sometime in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Right.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.